Welcome back to The Dark and Decrepit. I have DJ here again as my co-host. I am so unbelievably excited for this episode. I can't stop. I'm just
adrenaline, the butterfly.
It really is. Okay, so this is the story of Colleen Stan, otherwise known as the girl in the box.
Oh, so it is a girl.
It is.
Okay, so I didn't look up anything about any of this, and I didn't know if the girl in the box was like a victim or like the girl.
Okay, so
I
I
didn't
feel like this story is not well known at all. Like, a lot of people don't know about it. Every time I mention it to someone and they haven't heard it, I'm like, don't listen to it, wait for the podcast.
Yeah, don't!
Like, don't look anything up. This is one of the saddest, yet somehow my favorite, true crime stories ever.
Oh, wow.
It's not about a serial killer, but what Colleen Stan had to endure was, in my opinion, worse than death.
Yeah, death kind of is a gift sometimes.
Yeah, and it definitely would have been to her.
Oh, no.
Yes. So, the kidnapping happened May 19th, 1977.
Okay.
20-year-old Colleen Stan was attempting to make her way from her home in Eugene, Oregon, to a friend's birthday party in Westwood, California. Her roommates drove her to the highway, and then she began hitchhiking.
Okay.
She had given up multiple opportunities to make her way there. While she was waiting for this, there was like a car full of 4 or 5 guys around her age, and she didn't think it was safe, so she denied it. There was another couple who had offered to give her a ride, and she denied them as well. They weren't going very far. So then a couple rolls up. There's a man in the driver's seat and a woman in the passenger seat, and the woman's holding a baby. So she sees a couple with a baby, and she's like, this is probably a safe bet.
You know, safe for hitchhiking. My first thought was like, oh, this isn't safe for me to get into a car full of, party men. And I'm like, oh, well, I'm glad you have good judgment. It's my first thought.
Yes, exactly. It's like you're already hitchhiking, which is not a good idea, but at least you had like the mind to be like, okay, that's probably not good.
All right.
Yeah.
All right.
So she does get in this car.
Okay.
Thinks that it's pretty safe. They drove for a while, and then the man in the driver's seat made comments. It was like about some ice caves that he knew about. So he was like, "Hey, do you mind if we take a little detour?" And Colleen was like, in her head, she was like, "I mean, not really. I want to go to my friend's birthday party.
Yeah,
That's what I'm here for."
No to someone doing a favor for you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like, I'm in this person's car. They're like, kind of helping me out here. I can't really say no to that. Also, like, they're driving, so like, if I say no, then like, what? I just get out of the car and
Yeah, they're
find
gonna let
another
you
person
out.
to hitchhike with. So they drove for a while, and on this dirt road, and they go for a mile or so, and then they stop. And the woman steps out of the car with a baby, and she walks over towards this creek. And it's normal. And then the guy gets out of the car, and he comes to the other side, and he opens the passenger door, and he jumps in the back seat with Colleen.
Ew.
And he puts a knife to her throat.
Oh, gross. Okay.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
And he says, "Are you going to do what I say?" And she's frozen.
Yeah, because
She can't move. She has no idea. She's obviously not expecting this. So she's like completely frozen. There's a neck to her knife. There's a neck to her knife.
there is a neck to the knife. You're
Yes.
not wrong.
So there's a knife to her neck, and he says again, pressing harder, "Are you going to do what I say?" And she is very frightened.
As one is.
And she's like, "Yes." But very like quiet and timid. Like, what else are you going to say? No? Then you're going to slit my throat.
This day and age, in this economy, I would probably say no. But back in the day,
Yeah,
like
gas prices are high, you know?
Have you been to the grocery store recently? Like, just take me
Actually, I
now.
have not. I've been using Instacart a lot because your girl's not trying to go to the grocery store.
No joke. I tell like Tyler and people, my retirement plan is just dying before I get that old. So like, done. Cool.
Done. So he shows her a pair of handcuffs, and he grabs her hands, and he handcuffs them, puts them behind her back.
Okay.
And then he takes this weird leather strap contraption that he made, and he puts her head into it, and he tightens it around her face and her jaw so that her mouth can't move, and he puts a gag on her as well. You think that's horrifying. Then there was this box sitting next to her when she got into the car, and she didn't really think anything of it, and it's made of plywood, weighs about 20 pounds. He tells her to lay down, puts her head inside this box. Oh, he blindfolds her first. I'm sorry. Blindfolds her. She's gagged. She can't move her mouth. He puts her head into this giant box. The box is carpeted on the inside. Imagine like carpet rubbing against your face.
Yeah, that sounds like not very fun.
So he closes the box around her head and he hinges it shut.
Ew, no.
Yes. So she's just laying. I just almost knocked my cider over.
How dare gravity work? Sorry.
It's okay. That was my own fault for not knowing how to drink properly, I guess.
No. You're fine.
So he puts her head inside this carpeted, heavy box, and she's laying down in the back, and he covers her with a sleeping bag. She cannot yell. She can hardly breathe. Her breathing turned into gasping very quickly.
Yeah, because you're in a box.
Yeah, she's so confined. I, for one, am like slightly claustrophobic. It's gotten a lot better, like over the years, but I couldn't do that. I think I would die.
I mean, I feel like if I was put in that situation, I would immediately regret my choice of saying, like, I'd rather. I do have a question, though. Like, if a husband, presumably husband and wife, holding a baby in a car, how do they communicate? Like, this was the plan. Like,
Oh, we'll get to
oh, okay, I have lots
Yeah.
of questions.
Yes, no, I love them.
But,
I'm here
like,
for them. I'm
What
so
kind
excited.
of wife is like, oh, yeah, you spent your time on Etsy finding this box, and you put carpet
Oh,
in
no,
it?
he built this box himself.
Oh, okay. Well,
Completely himself. He builds a lot of contraptions himself. So we'll get to the masterminds behind this.
okay, well, I do
I
like
love your
creative
question.
men, but this is a very, like, as a lady, and I don't have a baby, so maybe that makes it different, but, like, how do you just go? Anyway, I'll let you continue the story, but I do have a lot of questions.
No, I'm
about
so
how we
excited
got
about
here.
them. So, anyway, sorry. He lays the sleeping bag. Oh, I love your questions, and I want you to keep asking them.
Okay.
But he lays the sleeping bag over her,
Okay.
and so she's covered up, and they're driving. She can't hear anything. She said she could hear like a very few traffic noises once in a while, but she's very confined, so she can't really hear too much. She
And
had a lot of
imagine how hot
medication.
that would be as well. Like
So
your own breath is now heating your face, and you're under it. Oh, she's literally.
So then he calls his wife back over to the car, and her and her seven-month-old child get back into the car, and they just casually drive home with this woman in the back of their car with her head in a box.
So they've been going to California.
They live in California. Yes.
Okay, well, that's-
so that is they didn't.
I'm glad they weren't lying.
No.
That's nice.
So they brought her into their house and they took her to the basement. He uncuffed one of her hands and quickly draped the cuffs over a beam on the
Okay.
ceiling. Well, there's a pipe in the rafters, so he draped it over that. She's like
pipe,
hanging
like
like
a
this.
water pipe.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes, and Colleen's arms were suspended above her head. He took off her pants and then replaced the handcuffs with wide, stiff leather bands, and then
Okay.
hooked her back up, but now wider, spread apart, hanging.
Why didn't we
over
start with
the cuffs.
that for the pants? I'm just wondering.
I don't know. He was a weird man.
I'm just efficient.
Yeah. And then
some pointers here.
he kicked, there was an icebox underneath her, and he kicked the icebox out from underneath her. So now she is hanging like this.
Rubber cuff.
Yes, and she described the most shocking, like, unbelievable pain
Yeah.
from obviously, like, your body
Your
going
weight.
down like that.
Yeah. It's like 130, 40 pounds of sheer person just hanging from your rotor cuff. Ligaments, I think it's a ligament.
And then he immediately started whipping her.
Why?
Yes. And Colleen just cried. She described feeling sharp pains that, like, went from her back and wrapped around to her stomach.
Oh, God.
Yes, super painful. So then the man leaves, and Colleen doesn't even notice him leaving because she's moaning so loudly from the pain that she's in.
Right.
The only reason she realized that he left is because she did hear him coming back down the stairs. He had went and grabbed his wife. And she's blindfolded, remember, and she's completely naked at this point.
Okay.
And she's crying and moaning and in pain, and they just have sex underneath her. Yeah, he was like, "Hey, honey, come down here."
It's rain and blood.
Oh gosh.
Oh, baby. Ew.
So yeah, she's seeing glimpses of this like through her blindfold,
Like
looking down.
'cause
Yes.
I guess that's the only peripheral you have is like up down, not up right.
Next, the man unhooked her and let her down.
Nice.
He put her in this box that had her arms suspended above her head.
Okay.
She barely had enough room to sit up. She tried to beg him to let her go, said that she would do anything, and he just cut her short and put her head back on that head box. So not only is she suspended in a box that she can barely sit up in, but her head is back in that head box.
Think about how heavy that would be. I mean,
20 pounds.
Yeah.
That's how heavy it was.
Because your head is already like,
Yeah.
pretty full of stuff. So yeah.
This man was 24-year-old Cameron Hooker, and his wife, Janice Hooker,
What a name.
who was, I don't know how old she was. I just know how old they were when they got together. So
Okay.
they're 4 years apart. So she
So
was
she's
20.
20.
Yeah. So she was 20 and he was 24. So let me tell you how this all came to be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Well, kind of. You're not really welcome.
You're sorry.
I'm sorry. Here we go. So Cameron grew up in a happy home. I know that that's so surprising, but he did. His parents were together his entire life. His father and his mother, he said he could not remember a single time that they even got into like a bickering.
Huh.
They never fought. Nobody was abused. He wasn't abused. He never experienced anybody else being abused. So what in the world made Cameron Hooker into this sadistic monster that he was? Obviously, we can't possibly know the answer to that. But later, I will talk about something that I think turned his interest into a fantasy that he could no longer resist. He had to have this fantasy. And I'm really excited to get to that part, and it's not until the very end, so stay tuned. But it is so good and it's so interesting. This is probably going to be a two-parter. I just want to put that out there. I totally forgot. But it's a lot of information, but all good stuff. So, when he graduated from high school, he started working at a lumber mill. And this was very mindless work, which gave him a lot of time to think about these magazines and things that he was reading. A lot of like, what is it called? S&M? S&M magazines. Do you know what that is?
Sexy things.
Yes.
Oh, okay. I like sexy things. Oh, okay.
But like sadistic sexy things.
Yeah, okay. Then
Which is like,
not, Rihanna sings about that.
she does, I
She
think,
goes,
yeah.
whips and chains excite me. I got you. I
Yes,
guess they were
so it's
exciting.
that. It's literally that. Yeah.
So, girl,
but-
Riri.
Yeah, Riri. I'm wearing her lipstick, aren't I?
Oh, we were wearing
Fancy
her lipstick.
lipstick,
Yeah,
yeah.
girl, Riri got me
Courtesy
so
of
many
DJ.
ways.
But so he's doing this mindless work at the lumber mill, and these fantasies are just flowing through his mind. He's having so much time to think about them. And at this point, he's a 19-year-old boy who just graduated high school. So I guess he got held back a year. 19? Maybe he was just a late bloomer. In 1973, a mutual friend introduced Cameron and Janice, who would later become his wife.
Okay.
She was described as a naive, insecure 15-year-old brunette with wired rimmed glasses and little personality is how she was described.
Oh.
Yes, actually how they like literally described her was her personality was less filled out than her immature body. That is what they said.
So, like, if her personality was a puddle and you stepped in it, like, your shoes wouldn't even get wet.
Your shoes wouldn't even get wet.
Yeah, wow. Okay, so she's shallow. Not like materialistic shallow, but like, not deep.
Yeah.
Literally the opposite.
And I'm sure the attention of this 19-year-old boy was beyond her. Like, she was like, why is this 19-year-old boy interested in me? I'm this 15-year-old
lumberjack. He
girl.
must be like a ripped 19-year-old.
I know. She was very submissive to him because of this. So she had a huge fear of rejection. No matter how poorly someone treated her, she just latched on to them. And this was no different when it came to Cameron. A few months into their relationship, Cameron said he wanted to tie her up and suspend her from a tree. And she did not want to do this. But she also didn't want to lose him. So she's telling him she doesn't want to do this. And he's like, all my girlfriends let me do this. And like, a ton of other people do this. And she was just like, yeah, okay. So she lets him do it. And she describes it as very painful, obviously. But the affection that he gave her afterwards made her okay with it. He would let her down and he would be so comforting and so loving and so caring that she just kept letting it happen. And this started happening a lot, and she was terrified of losing him, so she just let it be. And on the eve of their wedding, Janice actually confided in her friend about what had been going on in her relationship. And her friend said, if you figure you can handle it, go ahead.
Oh, what a great friend.
Red flag, DJ. That's a bad friend. If I
Yeah.
tell somebody that my significant other is stringing me up naked in a tree for fun, and you're casually like, I mean, if you can handle it.
My
that's cool.
husband Bill, he does weirder things. So
Yeah.
like,
My husband Bill, he like, I don't know, it's a little weird.
I don't want to get into my personal business, but you
But
gotta.
like, you're fine. He
like,
just
you-
strings you up in a tree.
I mean, just work on that upper body muscle. You'll be fine.
Yeah, she's like, the shame of walking away from this marriage would be much worse.
What a life.
Yeah, so sad.
At least I can afford rent, but like, yeah.
But January 18th, 1975, they got married in Reno, Nevada.
Yay!
So she
ooh.
listened to her friend. Yeah,
What a
of all
weird thing.
places. Barely. I'm sorry. It's not getting better, but I love it. Barely. Wow! Words are so hard today. Very shortly after they get married, Cameron starts telling Janice he wants to bring a third person into their home, another woman. So he presented it to her as like a win-win, right? He's like, you still get to be with me, but you don't have to take on all these brutal things that I like. I'll just do them to this woman.
Oh,
And
great.
she immediately agrees. She's like, yeah, that sounds good. But there was one condition. She did not want Cameron to have sex with this woman. In her mind, it was very important that they were man and wife, and that act should be solely reserved for a man and a wife. Admirable for a psychopath, Janice. So, at some point they came to an agreement. She was like, Cameron, you can have your sex slave, who you can't have sex with, if I can have a baby.
That's an equal trade.
Yeah,
I feel
but
that's
like,
fair.
what a compromise, DJ. Yeah, you can have a literal slave to torture in our house, but you have to let me have a baby because that's a healthy environment to bring a child into.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really seen that much worse. So yeah, I
same.
don't-
See, Keith was asking me the other day, he was like, how do you, like, listen to all this stuff? And, like, it's so, like, sad. And I'm like, well, I had a very unconventional upbringing, so that helps. This stuff makes me feel better about my life, which is sad, but it does.
Hey man, support comes in different ways.
It does. And I, like, read this stuff, and I'm like, I always, like, my whole life, I was always like, things could always be worse. It was like Eeyore, but he's like, things could be worse. I'm not sure how, but they could be. And, like, I love that. And I do feel that way. I always think that things could be worse. So that's like looking on the bright side, and it sounds negative, but I really don't think it is. It's just I always think things could be
I
worse.
think that helps you stay sane because when you feel like your life is out of control and woe is me, like woe is me is a really, really
Yeah, I don't
bad,
like it.
bad, like dangerous feeling because when you feel like you've had it the worst,
Yeah.
you just like project that onto everybody and then you just
Yes.
become like a sad
And I
sack.
never feel that way. Because
Yeah,
I think of
because
stuff like this.
We have murdering people and
Yes.
serial killers.
People are dying. So,
People are dying and that makes me feel better.
Yes. But anyway, they moved to a more suitable house. In fall of 1976, Janice and her baby, and Cameron, had done more than enough. I'm sorry, that was really mixed up. Janice and her baby and Cameron moved to this new place. And Cameron had done more than enough in preparation for his victim. He had been building all these weird contraptions and getting himself ready and getting their basement ready. But he said it was small, but it did the job. So finding someone was more difficult than he ever thought it would be.
We can't like go get volunteers, you know.
Yeah, I literally put in my notes, boo-hoo, serial killers are a bunch of crybabies. It's so bizarre to me that they talk about this stuff like I'm supposed to feel bad that you couldn't find your pussy victim, you friggin' weirdo.
I put a listing in the personals and no one has responded.
Yeah.
Uh.
So, like, So then he found Colleen hitchhiking. So Colleen had told her roommate, Alice, that she would be back on Saturday. And when that didn't happen, she was a bit worried.
As one is.
And she wasn't, like, super worried because, like, you know, she was going to see a friend. Maybe she's got caught up, but she was a little bit worried. So she called Colleen's mother to see if she had stopped to see her. And she obviously hadn't. So Colleen's friend Linda was who she was supposed to be visiting. She didn't have a phone. So on that Tuesday, Alice called the Westwood Police, which is where Linda lived.
Okay.
And they checked with her friend Linda, and she had told them she hadn't seen Colleen for some time. So then Alice was super worried. She contacted the Eugene Police Department and filed a missing persons report. That's a good friend right there.
Yes.
It was her friend,
Finally
her
have a safe
roommate.
person.
Yes. Unfortunately, like a lot of missing persons reports, it did nothing, which is sad.
Yeah,
but it
because
didn't.
you have like a 20-year-old woman.
Yeah, and I mean back then there were just
Right.
like weren't the resources that there are now, and it's not like they would have like. Yeah. So Janice said that she had an. Oh, I'm sorry. That's like. Yeah. Okay. So that happened in the report, and now we're back to Colleen and where she's.
Yeah, now we're talking about how this happened.
Janice said she had an unreasonable fear of Colleen. And you know what, Janice? Unreasonable is a really good word for that because you kidnap a 20-year-old girl and you're going to tell me that you were afraid of her?
Because isn't she like 20?
Yes, she's
Janice?
the same age as her. So she said that the first time she went to the basement to see Colleen because she heard her moaning, she took a shotgun with her just in case.
That's a reasonable people, reasonable
Yes.
people do.
Yes, Janice, because a 20-year-old, frightened, blindfolded, strung-up girl in your basement really stands a chance against you.
An unharmed, capable person,
Yeah.
in this moment, capable person. which
Again, I
is-
put in my notes, she's a C word and not the cookie kind. So let's
Oh, I love that.
get back to Colleen because I'm sick of talking about these psychopaths. Colleen spent entire days with this head box on, strung up, blindfolded, gagged, completely sensory deprived. The only break she got was in the evening, usually around 8 p.m. when the hookers, that's their name,
Yeah,
Cameron and
hookers,
Janice
yeah.
Hooker. So when the hookers, when they finished having dinner. So Cameron usually, but sometimes Janice would bring her leftovers. How kind. One afternoon, she needed to go to the bathroom, and she didn't want to soil herself.
As no one wants to.
Yes. I mean, she thought they would get mad, too. So she's restrained to this rack. Like, imagine like a box spring,
Okay.
but, like, no fabric or anything on it. That's kind of what this was like. Or
Okay.
like a cot. That's a better example. So, like a metal cot with nothing on it,
Yeah,
just the
like
top.
base of the
She's
top.
restrained to something like that. And she has the head box on, and she desperately wants to get someone's attention so she can use the bathroom. So she tries to make as much noise as possible. She tries to yell through her gag into the head box. She kicks and rattles her chains, and then realizes she should not have done that. Cameron comes down the stairs, and he takes her, and he takes the head box off of her, and he puts the leather straps on her again, and he looks at her, and he says, "Go ahead and scream. I'll cut your vocal cords out."
I just had to be. Or something.
So then he whipped her to unconsciousness after hanging her up again.
Well, at least she probably, used the bathroom in that time.
Yeah, so then she did soil herself, and she did not make noise again. As time went on, Colleen described that Cameron's actions and emotions were all over the place. Randomly, he would do things that seemed kind, like feed her multiple times a day, or just speak to her kindly. But it didn't seem like there was any correlation to her behavior. So she was just confused.
Yeah.
Which I think was his intention. I know he wanted her to know that it didn't matter what she did or how she acted. He was in charge. He was her master. He was going to do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, and it didn't matter what she did. Then out of nowhere, Cameron built some Harry Potter staircase room, but
Huh.
smaller and not as fun because Colleen was not about to be rescued by Hogwarts.
Oh man, wait for that letter. Waiting on an owl.
It's never coming.
Oh
The owl's not coming. So Cameron starts to put this room in the stairs. It has a little light. It has enough room for a small chair, which he put in there for her to sit on.
Okay.
And he starts putting her in there. And in this room, she's allowed to take her blindfold off, but only after he puts her in the room. So she has not seen Cameron's face since, we're almost 6 months in now, and she hasn't seen Cameron's face since the first day that she got into that car. Because she obviously saw it initially, she hasn't seen it since then. So then Cameron and Janice started to give her random tasks. They would give her bags of walnuts and tell her to shell them.
Ow.
They made her crochet things, and then they would sell them at the market in town.
Huh. Like, I could just imagine being, like, the little old lady being like, "Oh, did you crochet this yourself?" And she's like, "With love."
Yeah.
With, I just love
With
it.
my sex slave underneath my Harry Potter staircase. Yeah. So
I
after
like
spending some time on the rack, sometimes in the room, other times on the rack, I guess the hookers thought it was becoming more difficult to hide this woman. They couldn't live like this forever, they thought. So Cameron read an article in a newspaper talking about sex trade and how it also existed in the United States.
Mhm.
And it also had a copy of a slave contract. Who puts that in a newspaper? So Cameron loved this. He was obsessed with it. So he made Janet, mind you, Cameron could not read very well.
Interesting.
Yes, so a lot of times he just looked at pictures and he could read, but not super well. So he made Janice type up this contract exactly like the one he had seen in the newspaper.
It's copyright infringement.
Yes.
Just so you know.
And he wanted to use the alias Michael Powers, and he wanted her to use the alias Janet Powers. Because Janet sounds so different than Janice. Top-notch IQ moment, Cameron.
DJ, what name do you want to go by? You're gonna have a new identity. CJ.
Yeah. Yes.
Wow, no one will ever know.
Yes. So Cameron brings this article down to, he goes downstairs, he whips the Harry Potter staircase room open, and she doesn't have her blindfold on, and I'm sure in her mind she's like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna die.
I saw the outside world him.
Yeah, because I saw his face again. Like, he's obviously gonna kill me. Like, he's opening the door abruptly. So he puts this newspaper or article in front of her, and he says, read it. And she's frantic because they're giving her all these different tasks. So she takes this and she's like shaking and she's like trying to study this and read it, and she wants to read every word and take it in, but she's so confused. She's like, why is he making me read this? So then he gives her she reads it and she's taking it in and she's like, oh my gosh, is this what's happening to me? Am I being like sex traded? Like I'm so confused. Then he hands her the contract that he had Janice type up, and he had this like nice seal on it and everything, like a wax seal. Looked very professional. He gives her the contract and he says, read this and sign it. And I am going to read you the contract. So I got a lot of my information from this book called Perfect Victim by Christine McGuire and Carla Norton. It is an excellent book. I recommend everyone read it. It was very, very good. And it has a ton of detail about this case. All right, so I'm going to read the contract from the book. Some of it doesn't make sense, like the words that they use. I think he was just trying to use super fancy words to try and like make her believe this. This indenture, made the 25th day of January in the year of our Lord, 1978, between Colleen Stan, hereafter known as slave, and Michael Powers, hereafter known as master, witness that slave, for in the consideration and in humble appreciation of such care and attention as master may choose to afford her, has given, granted, alienated, enoffed, and conveyed, and by these presents does give, grant, enoff, and convey unto master all of slave's body and each and every part thereof, without reservation, every bit of her will as to all matters and things, and the entity of her soul, together with all and singular every privilege, advantage, and entrepreneurance to the same belonging or in any wise appertaining, also all the estate, right, title, interest, property, claims, ego, and ID of slave in, of, and to the same, and in, of, and to every part and parcel therefore, to have and to hold all and singular the above described body, will, soul, and presence, with all appertences, therefore, unto master and any of his assigns forever. And the said slave does covenant, promise, and agree, she shall immediately, diligently, and enthusiastically comply with and submit her full being to any and all directions of or desires of master or his assigns, which he and they may express by word, signal, action, and any other means. She shall at all times afford master absolute respect, shall address him only as sir or master, shall station himself in a physical position subordinate to his whenever possible, and shall speak to or otherwise distract him only when granted his permission. She shall constantly maintain her female body parts in such circumstances as will demonstrates and ensures that they are fully open to him. In particular, she shall never cross her legs in his presence, shall wear no undergarments at any time, and shall cover no part of her body with apparel or material of any description except when the act of doing so and design of the item are expressly approved by him. she shall preserve her female body parts for the exclusive use of him and his assigns, which use shall be the sole source of her pleasures, and she shall engage in no self-gratification, nor any physical contact with any others. And slave does hereby irrevocably declare and acknowledge her everlasting, unconditional dedication to serving master to his full satisfaction. And she ashamedly confesses that prior indulgence of her untempered conduct by others may have permitted her to become afflicted with inferior habits that may prove unsatisfactory to master, from which imperfection she implores master to free her from retaining with corporal punishment or any other means which he, in his unquestionable wisdom, deems effective towards directing her to her sole ambition and life destiny of perfecting and fulfilling his every desire of her. In witness whereof slave has hereunto set her hand, and master designed to seal these presents by permanently asphyxiating his collar about her neck on the date first above written.
I have a couple questions.
Yes.
How legally binding is a contract when you don't use your name? Like, because he used an
Well,
alias.
this is not legally binding at all.
I'm
You
just
can't
saying.
sign a contract and say that somebody belongs to you now because that's illegal.
Right, I'm just saying, like, and I agree. But, like, what was the point? If he didn't use his name, it's not legally binding. You're going to have to tell me.
Yeah.
I have lots of questions. Like,
So-
what was the point of this?
None of this was an actual legally binding document. Like, in his head, he wasn't like, she's legally going to be bound to me. He was trying to convince her that she was stuck with him and that she was a part of this slave trade program and that if she tried to escape, there's more to this. So that's the contract that he made her sign. But he also starts to tell her about this thing called the company. And you're going to hear this a lot. He convinced her that the company was an organization within the United States. And it went very widespread. There were very big people involved in this. And how it worked is that women of opportunity were taken, and basically any woman who would let her guard down, they would take these women and they would become slaves, sex slaves, and they had to sign these contracts, and they had to wear a collar, and they now belonged to this person. But the company, you should fear the company more than you fear the master. So your master is to be feared, but you should fear the company more, because the company, should you try to escape, should you tell anyone what's going on, you will be so brutally beaten that you will wish you were dead. But they won't kill you. They will just brutally beat you and hang you for days and days and days. So he did all of this to instill such a fear in her that she wouldn't try to leave, that she wouldn't try to tell someone. He told her a story about a girl, a slave, who was put into the company, and she thought she could escape and tell a police officer what was happening. And she ran up to the police officer's car, and she told him what was happening. And the police officer was like, yes, get in my car. And he was a part of the company.
Oh, so this is kind of like a government conspiracy theory that he would...
Yes, it's fake. It's all
It's
fake.
all
It's all lies. It's made up. But he made it so convincing. He brings her... This article was real.
Yeah.
This was about a real thing that, there is sex trafficking and things that happen like that in the United States. But the company was not real.
No.
Not the way he was describing. So he tells her all that, and she sobs. She's sobbing uncontrollably, and she's distraught, obviously. And Cameron is thrilled, because in his head, her being so upset, he's like, she believes this.
Yeah, he won that.
And she did. He believed it. She believed it. So he gives her this collar, and he tells her to sign the contract, and she goes to sign her name, and she looks at him, and she says, you can have my mind, and you can have my body, but you will never have my soul. And he looked at her, and he said, that's for God.
Oh, well,
And then she signed it.
well, good thing he's a religious man,
Yeah.
Thank
So,
God.
yeah, you would think, but no, he uses religion as a terrible tool. And yes, it's disgusting, and we'll talk more about that. But now he gives her a slave name, and her slave name is K, just the letter K. And he said he had thought about B or D, but he went with K.
Well, I'm glad he's a deep thinker.
You know why I think he went with K? Because that sounds like an actual name. Like my grandmother had a very good friend, and her name was K. It was K-A-Y. But, like, you could tell somebody your name is K, and they're not going to think it's a singular letter.
Yeah.
But, again, I have a very, very cool thing to talk about later that we'll get into that talks about why, I think this is exactly why he did this. And I can't talk about it now because we're going to get to it later. But I think that the thing I'm going to talk about later has everything to do with why he did all of these things. So, he explained to her that the company was watching at all times. So the phones were monitored, her family was being monitored. They knew everything about her. They knew her now, right? They had her license, so they knew she was Colleen Stan. So they gave her information to the company. And the company looked into her family, and her family was being watched. The phones were being monitored. Everything about her life was being watched and dissected. She had no chance if she tried to escape or tell anybody what was going on. And she was convinced of this.
Yeah.
So Cameron feels great at this point because he has his sex slave now and he can do whatever she wants to her, and she's now going to be completely submissive, more so than ever, because she's terrified. Janice is worried now.
I was going to ask about the wife, like, because she signed a contract signing away all of her feminine parts that they're to be used by said master.
And there was a rule that they're not supposed to have sex. So Janice wants to test Cameron because she's not feeling good about her relationship. And so she says to Cameron, she says, do you want to bring Kay? They're laying in bed one morning. Do you want to bring Kay up here and have sex? And he doesn't say anything. He just goes downstairs. He grabs Kay. He gags her. He blindfolds her. He brought her upstairs. He puts her wrists onto the headboard. He ties her legs to the bottom of the bed. And then he rapes her. And with Janice right next to him. And Janice is pregnant, mind you, again.
Okay.
And she can't take this. She gets unbelievably sick. She goes to the bathroom. And once she's like done throwing up and being sick, Cameron's done doing his sick deal over there. She tries to leave. And Cameron stops her. It's like, stop. You're fine. Like, we're going to get through this. And he takes Kay back down to the basement and puts her in the box. She's not even allowed in her room now. She gets put in the box again.
Aw.
Then they move.
Like houses?
Houses.
Oh.
So they move to this new house. It's a trailer, actually, so it's smaller. And Cameron builds this waterbed. I can never imagine what a waterbed looks like, but I should look that up because I always imagine it's kind of cool.
I've sat on a waterbed.
Are they cool?
Would you like me to try it? Yeah, it's okay. They have deemed it not very supportive for like your back
Yeah, I
and
would
stuff.
think so.
I
I'd
think
be
it's,
like, sloshy.
yeah, so you have to have like a heater in it or else it'll deplete your like natural body temperature and you'll like get super cold and you like that's one of the
I feel like
basics.
men would love that because men are always so unbelievably warm.
They are very warm. I do not understand. I looked into that this morning actually.
Oh, my science DJ, I love her.
Oh, I was trying to figure something out. It turns out that the air vent over our bed was closed because the heat from winter was like causing me to have sinus issues. So Tyler he so graciously closed it, and then I was like, why are you so hot? And I looked up and I was like, oh. Anyway,
And he was like, sorry babe, can't help it. I'm just kidding.
so picture like you know how you get a fish in a bag?
Yeah.
Okay. Picture the bag being like the rectangle shape.
Mhm.
That rectangle shaped bag goes into like a bed frame that is on the like ground, or the one that I was in. My homeschool friends had a waterbed growing up. That was pretty cool. And they did their schoolwork in the parents' room where the computer was. So I got to sit on the bed. It wasn't like a weird thing. Like they were doing schoolwork and I was hanging out with them during like summer or like they didn't finish their work before I got to school. But it was pretty cool. It does make sloshy noises. Some of the more eccentric people put little goldfish in them sometimes.
Not that I want this to be good, but that doesn't sound very good for raping someone.
You would feel the motion of the ocean?
Oh gosh, okay.
Sorry, I'm trying to make it better.
I'm just saying, like
Gross.
somebody, he thinks about all these things and prepares for all these things, but then you get a waterbed? That does not sound like a smart move.
It feels like trying to run through sand. Like,
I don't know. Well, anyway, he built this waterbed,
me.
and he built it like very extravagant, and underneath it he builds a coffin-sized box.
Okay.
And this is placed under the bed, and Kay had to crawl into it on her hands and knees, and to get all the way in, and then he would bolt the bottom of the box shut.
Interesting.
And she would have her bedpan in there. So she spent a lot of time in the box when they first moved. Janice was getting ready to have a baby. Cameron didn't want her to go to a hospital. He said that he had a fear that they were going to like switch the baby around and all this stuff. I don't know.
That was a thing.
Yeah, that was. People had that fear, but I mean, they had their first daughter in a hospital and no problems. But he had this fear, so he wanted his daughter to be born at home. So they had a home birth. So now they have two daughters. And they don't have any more children after this, just their 2 daughters.
Okay, that's good.
So then Janice gets a job. And yeah, because they have 2 daughters now, and Cameron's like, you need to get a job because we need money. So you're going to go get a job. And now Kay was regularly let out of the box for longer periods of time. Cameron talked to her a lot about the company to scare her more and to keep it in her head, hey, I'm letting you out of the box more, I'm giving you more freedoms, but you're still my sex slave, and the company, they will come for you if you try to do something. Don't be stupid. She was only allowed to shower when Cameron ordered her to, and it was almost always so that he could rape her.
Ew.
Or sodomize her.
Ew.
Yeah, sodomy. Anyway, she made dinner, she did chores, she was raped regularly, and Cameron started making her perform drills. So in the contract it says that they have to act like a corporal, or something like that. But
Yeah.
so he starts making her perform these drills, and anytime he says, "Attention!" she has to strip. I know that was funny, but it's not funny.
It's not funny, but like.
So anytime he says, "Attention!" she has to strip all of her clothes off, go to the doorway, stretch her hands up
assume
all
the
the way.
position, yeah.
Yes. Wrap her fingers around the doorway, and then hang until he tells her to stop.
Why naked?
Because she always had to be naked. Almost always. So in this sense, if she wasn't naked already, she had to. But she was naked, like, I'll just tell you right now, went through this box thing for 7 years. Yes. And during those 7 years, she was naked most of the time.
I just think about like UTIs and stuff, like.
Yeah.
Like if you soil yourself enough, it's just bound to happen, and like they're not going to take her to get antibiotics, so
No.
like.
Yeah. I don't know. I didn't hear about any of that stuff.
Yeah, she would have probably mentioned it. Just the risk is just.
Maybe, but also maybe she just didn't. I mean, this is the 70s. I don't know how much they really, were active about that stuff.
And also, if you're getting raped multiple times, if you feel pain down there, that's
You're
probably normal.
just thinking, you're probably just
I
thinking
just got
it's-
raped the other day. This
Exactly.
Is fine.
Yeah, you're not really worried about that. It's kind of least of your worries. So, she had to do those drills, and then being out of the box more meant that she was more likely to be seen by other people. So, they would have her out doing chores and stuff all the time. And one time she was in a raggedy nightgown, scrubbing the floors, and Cameron's father came over, and they didn't expect him to come over. He didn't even knock. He just walked in the door because, why wouldn't your father be able to just walk in your house, right? Because you have a sex slave. So he just comes in the door, and Kay's scrubbing the floors, and Cameron grabs her, and Janice distracts the dad, is talking to him, and Cameron takes her into the room and puts her in these dumb clothes, just throws these random clothes on her, and then brings her out and was like, hey, this is Kay, she's our friend, she's just been helping us out with some chores around the house because we've got the new kid and stuff. And their dad's like, oh, cool, nice to meet you. And he's like, yeah, I gotta take her home though, so I'll be right back. And he takes her out back to the shed, locks her in there, drives around for 10 or 15 minutes, comes back, socializes with the dad, talks with Janice. He suspects nothing. He's like, oh, cool, yep, see you later, son. Love ya. And then he goes back out to the shed, grabs Kay, puts her back in the box.
Now.
So shortly after this, Kay experienced a year out of the box. In this year, she was given more responsibilities with less supervision.
Okay, that's nice.
And
promotion.
yeah, so she referred to this as the year out because she really did spend an entire year out of the box, basically. She was allowed to work in the gardens. She was outside. She could go on jogs. She babysat the kids. She still did the chores, and after a while, she was even allowed to go into town and do shopping for the
How
family.
exciting!
Yes, so she started to get to know a lot of people. She was rarely in the box for that whole year. One night, out of nowhere, when she was in the box, they took her out of the box, and she was told to go shower and get her makeup done. And she got her makeup done, and they did her hair, and they got her dressed in Jan's clothes. And then Jan was like, I'm taking you out with me. We're going to the bar. Yeah.
How did they have her skin tone foundation? Just wondering.
I don't know.
Things
they're the
that
same.
Maybe.
Um,
Probably pretty pasty from sitting in a box. Just got
so
liquid
they
makeup.
meet some guys who offer them to go home with them. And they do. And yeah. And Janice sleeps with one of the guys. And
Interesting.
yes. And Colleen does not. She just sits there and is okay, and lets Janice do her thing, and she comes back out and she's like, all right, let's go home. So Jan was doing this to try and make Cameron jealous, but Cameron was not jealous at all. He had told her multiple times that she could date other men, and he wouldn't care.
Oh, that's kind of sad.
Yeah, I don't really feel bad for her.
I mean, I feel bad for her, but I mean, like, you know, like, what if your significant other that you were, like, trying so hard to impress that you got a sex slave for him and you let him tie to trees was like,
Yeah, DJ,
yeah.
you're not helping her case. I still don't feel bad for her.
I mean, I don't feel bad for her because, like, she was definitely a big accomplice here, but, like, just to put, I guess this makes me sound like a serial killer, but, like, if I put myself in her shoes and I was doing all these things to impress my little husband, it's not working. He still doesn't like me.
Yeah, I mean, there's like
Yeah.
it's really hard to you like kind of do feel bad for Janice because like you know she is in this situation and she wanted this because she didn't want to have to deal with this stuff anymore, and I feel bad for that. But I also don't feel bad for you because you didn't have to let this stuff happen. I get it, like, but you didn't have to marry Cameron. That was because of your own insecurities and your own problems.
Yeah.
And I get that. That's hard to work through, but you can't use that as an excuse. You chose to marry this psychopath. You knew he was a psychopath. You knew he had she knew he had these fantasies. So then you still married him, and then now someone else has to take the brunt of that punishment because you didn't want to? Like, I get it. You shouldn't have to either, but you chose to go into this situation, and now you're just letting this woman suffer in all these ways, and I don't agree with that. Like, I can't feel bad for you, and like, you know, I can't feel bad for her. She like gets off scot-free too, so.
Oh, that sucks.
Yeah.
Because, like, it was one of those conversations like you should always disclose your kinks before you get married because there's no surprises. You can't do that. It's like rude. It's like, you know, against code of conduct, I guess. But like she knew because before they got married, he was
Doing all that stuff.
hanging naked from a tree, and I guess it didn't help. Like her friend was like, "Oh yeah, that's fine."
Yeah, I don't know.
That's
I
not the
mean, I know
weirdest-
she didn't have a lot of support, but I still don't feel
Yeah,
bad
no,
for her.
because she like any 18-year-old, 19-year-old person should know like taking another person is bad. They teach you that in like Dare or something. In
Yeah.
middle school, yeah.
So now more people are moving into the neighborhood, and Kay is out of the box, and they're just like, yeah, this is Kay, our live-in babysitter. And she was supposed to act normal, and she could talk to people. She wasn't allowed to start a conversation, and she was not to try and continue any conversations. But she was to be friendly and just say hi and answer any questions anybody had, but be very brief. She wasn't supposed to talk much. So now Kay feels like she's made some headway with Cameron. So she asked him one day to call her family, and he lets her.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, you weren't expecting that, right? You were like, he's gonna like hang her up and beat her.
Yeah, I was kind of expecting that. I was kind of expecting like if I could talk to my family and I was in a sex slave situation, it'd be like me calling Pizza Hut with my abuser right behind me, like I like pepperoni, and they'd be like, "Are you okay?" I'd be like, "No, I don't want sausage, just pepperoni." Like you know.
Yeah.
I like speak at codes like, help.
So she calls her family because he lets her, but he reminds her the company is monitoring the phones. So she can't do anything like that because if her family's trying to do like code communication, she's terrified that the company's listening and they'll know. So he's also standing right there. So her sister answers, doesn't even recognize Colleen's voice. And she's asking her a ton of questions. Colleen doesn't say much. She's just like happy to be talking to her sister. And Cameron quickly makes her hang up. So she talks to her like very, very, very brief, and then she has to hang up. So soon after this, Kay tells Cameron she loves him.
Interesting.
Yes. And clearly, that's some Stockholm syndrome going on.
Okay, yeah,
She
for sure.
does not love him. And, huh?
What is love? Baby, don't hurt me. Don't hurt me. No more.
So she was clearly still a slave, but he did start to show her more kindness. And in his head, everything he had built and was trying to build was finally working. Cameron told Colleen that he also loved her and that someday she would be his slave wife and they would have children together.
How nice.
Yes. And now things were becoming tense between Kay and Jan. They're bickering a lot. Cameron's having to deal with both sides of it on a daily basis. He got so sick of it one day he took both women out into the woods, strung them up, and whipped them, and told them that he was the dominant one in this situation and they had to listen to him. He was their master. And he was in charge, and it was his house, and they were going to do what he wanted and what he said. The situation didn't get any better. So Janice quit her job, and because Cameron made her, And he said, you're going to take care of the kids because Kay's going back into the box.
Oh, that's one way to deal with a cat fight.
Yeah. Before she went back into the box, Cameron was going to allow her one freedom. Do you want to know what it is? Take a guess.
Ice cream.
Ooh, it's actually better than ice cream.
Oh,
He was going to let her see her family. Like, visit them.
oh my God, no way. Oh, I that is better than ice cream.
Yes.
I mean, I guess it depends on your family, but yeah.
Yeah, like, I would take ice cream.
Hands
Hands down. I don't even like ice cream, and I would take ice cream. Chocolate ice cream, for that matter.
That's awful.
So anyway, he said first she needed to pass some tests.
Okay.
So the first test he did, he takes a shotgun, and he
Okay.
says, put this around your mouth. And he puts it around her mouth.
Oh.
And he says, pull the trigger. And she has no idea if this gun is loaded. She doesn't even know what kind of gun it is. She pulls the trigger. Nothing happens.
So she passed. She studied.
Yep. So, she passed that. Then he went over a lot more rules with her, and he even drove her to an abandoned warehouse, which he told her was the company headquarters. And he said that she had to take a lie detector test, and that he had to pay $30,000 in insurance fees just for this to happen. So she should be thankful. And he drove her to this building, and he made her wait forever, like hours. And then he came back out, and he was like, they said you don't have to take the test, but they're watching closely. And then he drives her to
machine.
Huh?
He probably couldn't just figure out the machine.
Like, didn't have a machine. This was all lies.
Oh,
He went to an abandoned building. He hung out there for hours, probably like did some weird stuff, and then
crossword puzzles.
crossword puzzles. Yeah, that's probably what he did. And then he drove her to see her family for the weekend. He drives her there. He drops her off at the house. He doesn't even go inside. He just drops her off, and then he goes away and he's like, "I'll be back in 3 days." So
Wow.
she goes in and she's talking to her family and she's telling her family, yeah, me and my fiance, Michael, we're moving, so I don't have an address to give you because we're in the midst of moving.
What a goodbye.
Yeah, and well, she's terrified of the company. She is so convinced that they're watching, that they're monitoring everything. Her family notices that she's very malnourished, that she's not doing well, but they don't want to pressure her. They don't want to make her feel bad.
Yeah, they want her to disappear for like years again.
Exactly. They're terrified of losing. Exactly. They think it's her choice. They're terrified of losing her. So they don't hound her. They're trying to be good about it. So they pour over albums all night. They're up all night talking. The next morning they go to church. They go visit her sick aunt and her cousins. They go see Colleen's mother. They spend like part of the day with her. And then after she's like, Mom, I'm going to come see you before I leave. I promise. She gets back to the house, her father's house. Shortly after she gets back to her father's house, Michael calls, a.k.a. Cameron.
Yeah.
He says, it's time to go. I'll be there in 10 minutes. And she's like,
You promised me
I was
3 days.
supposed to be here 3 days from now. And he was like, time to go. And he shows up. It's hardly been 24 hours. And it's clearly a power move. He wanted to show her, I can give you whatever I want, but I can just as quickly take it away. And I will, because you're my slave. And I have all the power over you. So he gave her this little taste of something and then completely took it away. So then he goes there, he meets the family, says hello. They leave. They drove back through the night, get home. When they got back, he makes her vacuum out the box, put a blanket in it, gives her makes her take a shower.
Mm-hmm.
He then rapes her, gives her the bedpan, puts her back in the box. Kay does not come out of the box for more than eating for 3 years.
Oh.
3 years. She's allowed out of the box to eat, sometimes clean her bedpan. That's it.
Did she shower?
No.
Ew.
Yeah.
Like, just think about, okay, so you have like your natural like circadian rhythm where like the sun comes up and then goes down. That's when you know it's bedtime, and the sun comes up and that's how you know it's uptime.
She hadn't had that in so long.
Time would be like
Irrelevant.
irrelevant and unfathomable. Like
Yeah.
how much time is
She does talk about how like time is kept track for her through like birthdays and stuff. Like she learned like their birthdays and stuff. She knew them, so like a birthday would come up and she'd be like, "Oh, it must be this day," because she knew. But that's the only relative time frame she had.
She sounds kind of smart in the sense of like
Yeah, like she was keeping track of that stuff.
yeah.
That's crazy smart. So then on December 31st, 1983, when Colleen turned 27, the hookers let her out of the box, and they had made her a birthday cake because it was her birthday.
Okay.
Yeah. So Cameron and Janice sing her happy birthday, and they all ate chocolate cake and ice cream together.
Okay.
So this is a huge turning point. She's now allowed out of the box more often. It started small, but gradually grew into longer days and nights out of the box. Some nights she was even allowed to stay out of the box and stay in the bathroom. Like sleep in the bathroom.
Yeah, so she's still confined, but not in a carpet box.
That box didn't even have carpet.
Oh, this was just a box.
It was just a plywood box with a blanket in it.
Oh, is this the
sometimes.
coffin box under the
Yes.
bed? Oh, okay.
Yep. Not the head box. She's being fed more. She even started filling out a bit, like her body.
Oh, nice.
So she started, instead of being like 110 pounds now, she was like 125, which is saying a lot for somebody who was confined in a box for that long.
Yeah.
So then one day, Cameron tells her that the company is going to let her get a job.
Oh, how nice of them.
So nice. You get to make money for our family, you slave. So they clean her up, they give her some decent clothes, and they drive her around to find jobs. She gets hired at as a housekeeper at a motel. And she's now allowed to sleep on the floor in the living room.
I know the kids are young because it hasn't been that long, but wouldn't one of the kids be like, hypothetically, maybe like 5?
Yeah. Absolutely.
Isn't that a lot to explain to like a 5-year-old child? I'm just thinking.
So
Outside
they
the box.
really shielded the children from this. I know it sounds like that would be really difficult, but the kids weren't there.
If they're at school all day.
They're at school, yeah. So they really did a good job of shielding the children from this, from everything I've read, which is crazy to me, but they did. So
Okay, thanks for answering that question.
of course.
I was just thinking, like,
I know, I thought about that so much. I was like, how do you shield children from this craziness? But they also, they knew Kay as the babysitter and the housekeeper. So when she would go into the box, they probably just thought she went home.
yeah, but like she was out of the box for 3 years, I guess.
No, she was
Or
in the box.
Excuse me,
for
in
3
the
years.
box for 3
Yeah,
years.
so then they were just like, yeah, Kay left. And then she came back. When she got out of the box, I get to that too. They paraded her around the neighborhood. We're like, Kay's back! And everybody was like, oh, cool! Because remember, people knew her. She started going shopping in the neighborhood, so they just paraded her around and were like, Kay's back. And everybody was like, awesome, that's so exciting.
Just so, like, my brain went to a really weird space, and I guess I will share it for anyone who enjoys it. Feel free to cut this out. Like, could you imagine being, like, Janice and Cameron in bed? He's just, like, holding her, like, I think I'm gonna let Kay out of the box tomorrow. Oh, that sounds like a really good idea, honey. Yeah, I think we'll get her a cake. It's her birthday. Oh, that's so nice. We'll make it nice for her.
How about some chocolate ice cream?
Yeah, and then, if she's gonna come, and then, like, later, like, she's gonna come out more, I guess we need to, like, explain somehow to the neighbors that, she's back there. Like, yeah,
We should get her a job.
yeah, like, just imagine, like,
The conversation, how did this all happen? I'd be so curious to know.
yeah, I just picture them, like,
Well, Cameron was not a talky one when he got arrested, so we don't get that information.
oh, interesting, okay.
Yes.
I just want to know. I just think, like,
Yeah,
your
no,
sweet
that's-
nothings in your girlfriend
Yes.
likes you, and you're like, I'm gonna let Kay out of the box. Oh, that's
Okay,
real
honey,
nice.
that sounds great. So her and Janice started reading the Bible together often. Yes. And Cameron even allows her to go to church with Janice.
Okay, I wonder if they read the part in Exodus where they let the people go.
Just
wondering.
not. So this was a bad move for Cameron. Great for
Yeah.
Colleen, terrible for Cameron. The pastor was saying the opposite of what Cameron had been instilling in these women. His interpretations of the Bible did not align with what Cameron had been telling them so many times. One day, Janice talks to the pastor and tells him a little bit about what's going on with her and tells her that Cameron is using the Bible. He tells her, that Cameron is using the Bible against her. And
Right.
what's going on with her is not okay. And she gets very confused and very angry because she cares about the Bible, allegedly. I mean, you can't care about it that much if you're doing what you're doing and allowing this to happen in your house.
Yeah.
But maybe I give the benefit of the doubt, and Cameron really was using it against her. She has this large, faith. She has very strong faith, and he's interpreting the Bible differently to her,
Mhm.
and she's believing it because it's Cameron. It's her husband.
Yeah.
What else is she supposed to believe? So that happens. She's confused. She's angry. This is wild. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
No, you're not.
Okay, alright.
She drives straight to Kay's job after this. And she opens the door and to the room that she was cleaning. And she says, Kay, the company's not real. You've been lied to this whole time. You're not a slave, and neither am I. I never was. I'm Cameron's wife.
Get in, loser, we're going shopping.
For real.
We're out of here. We're at
Girls
5,000.
So Kay is like,
The fuck?
what? You're fine. She's like, what? She's so taken back, but also then she goes, oh, but you can't leave. You need to work for the rest of the day because we can't let Cameron know that we know. We can't let Cameron know that you know. So she makes her work the rest of the day. She goes, yeah, when Cameron and I pick you up later, you have to act completely normal. So they pick her up later from work, and they drive home, and they had talked to the pastor earlier, too. They went there together, and the pastor had told them, you need to leave immediately. And they were like, oh, we can't because of Cameron. And he's like, okay, well then get through the night, act normal. Tomorrow morning, I'm choking on a nut.
Sorry.
Honey roasted.
Clarification.
So they drive.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. So they talked to the pastor. The pastor was like, you need to leave. They're like, I can't. So they're like, okay. They waited until the next day. Janice actually chose to sleep with Colleen that night on the floor in the living room. And Cameron didn't think anything of it. He was like, yeah,
Why
whatever.
would he think anything of it? That the girls who
Because he's annoyed. Yeah, he was like, he's just annoyed with them. He's like, they're getting closer though, and he knew that. They were reading the Bible together, they were going to church together now, they were kind of friends, and he knew this now. So it wasn't the cat fighting that he used to see.
I'm just saying, like, if they used to cat fight and now they're getting close, wouldn't you?
He's happy about it. This is what he wanted. He wanted his slave and his wife to get along so that he could have them both the way he wanted. So he's happy, and he's like, cool, have fun, good night. So then the kids go to Bible study the next morning. They take the bus. Isn't that bizarre? You let your children take the bus to whatever. And then Cameron goes to work.
The Jesus bus.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. But,
or like a city bus. I was thinking like a school bus, but for Jesus school.
Yeah,
it might have been like a
like
city
that.
bus.
So
But
Cameron
they're,
goes to work, and Kay and Janice start packing all their stuff. And they pack up the kids, and they pick them up from Bible study, and they take them to Jan's parents. And now Jan and Colleen are talking about their options. They talk about maybe raising the kids together, giving them a good life. They could both work and raise the kids and be good. But then Colleen has this little voice in the back of her head, thank goodness, that she should not do this, that this is a bad idea, and that she needs to go home.
Yeah, because like if you just had your captors and one of them is now anarchying, and why would you stay if you know that everything is a lie?
Well, this is all she's known,
Right,
and that's really, really hard to leave. It's like, this is all you have. And she's thinking in her head, too, am I even going to be able to get a job? Am I going to be able to live a normal life? Like, she doesn't think she's going to be able to do that.
This is her new normal.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Ooh, New Normal by Sasha Alex Sloan.
That's probably where it came from.
Wow. But Colleen knew she shouldn't do that, so she calls her dad, and her dad wires her money for a bus ticket. And when she gets to the bus station, she calls Cameron.
Oh, you.
And she says, I know everything was a lie. And he starts bawling and apologizing to her. And she's just like, and hangs up.
Good.
And then
Appropriate.
she gets on the bus and she goes home. Colleen went home and is now living with her father. She sought immediately to try and get a job. And her family pleaded with her to go to the police because she told them everything. But Colleen was like, I just want to move on with my life. I don't want to think about it anymore. I don't want to go through all of this. I just want to move on. So she did not call the police. She did, however, call Cameron and Janice multiple times after she had been home. And she also wrote them letters many times.
Interesting.
It's a Stockholm thing for sure.
Yeah.
Like the letters she wrote, in some of them, they did like Bible verses, and I wish that I had it. I'm sure I could find it, but it would take me a minute. But she puts a Bible verse in there that like very much makes it seem like she was telling them like, it seemed like you were my friends, like in my head, but you were absolutely my enemy, and you did me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like it was good. So Jan ended up going back to Cameron for a while because she was like talking to her parents, and the only thing she had told her parents is that they like had a fight, right? She didn't tell them anything else, so they don't know that he's like this sadistic psychopath and that Kay was like a slave.
Yeah, but if Cameron no longer has said sex slave, and he still has these thoughts, hypothetically, I wouldn't go home because I'd be like, oh no, now I'm going to be the person that he's gonna like rape in the shower.
You would think.
But I guess she's kind of not a free thinker.
Yeah. So her parents like don't know about all that stuff. So they're like, you should try to work your marriage out. You shouldn't throw away the last 7 years of your life. Like, go back. But they don't know all this stuff.
Yeah.
So Jan ended up going back to him for a while. He promised he would change. He was calling her constantly, sobbing, telling her that he was going to change and that he loved her. Yeah.
Heard that before.
Boo. Yeah. Same. He promised he would change, but shortly after, he was the same person he always was. Also same. So
that's always what happens.
It is always what happens. So one night, she said, let's burn everything. She was like laying in bed with him. She thought things felt like very tense. She was very scared. She was like, let's burn everything. Now, I will say, I do not believe that the intentions behind this were pure. I think that Janice did not feel good about things. I think she knew that things were unraveling. She knew that Colleen was gone now. She was back with Cameron. And she wanted to get rid of any evidence that could have gotten her in trouble. So in her head, she was like, let's burn everything, Cameron. Because she knew she couldn't make that decision. If she burned all his stuff, he'd be so angry with her.
Yeah.
Who knows what would happen. So she convinces him that they should do it. And together, they burned the contract, photos of Colleen, tons of the bondage equipment. And Jan thought everything was gone. But Cameron cared way too much about all that stuff. He had taken pictures of the contract before he burned it. So he still had it. He still had plenty of pictures of Colleen. And so Jan thought all this stuff was gone. She came home one day and realized that that tons of the stuff were still there.
Yeah, because he's like a proud creator. Like,
Yeah, he's gonna get rid of all that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
make him get rid of all his hard work.
Yeah, that's what was in his mind. So she realized that this was not going to change. She thought it was gone for good, and it wasn't. So she starts seeing this doctor, and she's leaving the doctor's office one day, and just like a doctor for like regular checkups.
Okay, not
like a therapist. And she's leaving the receptionist the one day, or she's leaving the one day, and she talks to the receptionist, and they start talking for like 2 hours. And then they start talking regularly. They start hanging out. They become friends. They talk on the phone. Eventually, Janice can't even keep up with her real name, confessed everything to this woman. And the woman begged her to go to the police. And Janice was like, I can't, what about my girls? This is their dad. And she said, what's going to stop him from doing this to your daughters?
Yeah, was one of my thoughts when they were like little.
Yeah, and even with her own fear of what was going to happen to her and what would happen to her daughters if she got arrested and all this, she was like, I have to do it. So, boom, 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 finally, Janice went to the police in November of 1986 and told them everything.
Wow, that is a plot twist for me.
You are not ready for this next one.
Oh, I thought this was like the end.
No, we are not at the end.
Okay.
So, she also told them that during a shopping trip in Chico on January 31st, 1976, this was before Colleen's abduction, the hookers saw a young woman walking along Mangrove Avenue around 4 p.m. They offered to give her a ride, and she accepted. They stopped at her destination at the corner of Rio Lindo Avenue and Parmack Road, and Janice opened the door to let the girl out. But then apparently Cameron changed his mind. He grabbed the girl by the wrist and pulled her back into the car. Janice said that she later learned from looking at the girl's driver's license that her name was Marie Elizabeth Spanik. They drove north on Highway 99 for a while. Cameron put the head box on her.
Okay.
That he later used on Colleen. He put it over her head, and then he apparently stopped for a bite to eat and left Janice and this woman with this box on her head in the car. And Janice said that she was sitting there trying to comfort her and calm her down and tell her that everything was going to be okay, but everything was not going to be okay.
So this is like a true story that happened before Colleen.
Yes.
So just to reiterate so I can
Yes,
wrap my
this
brain
is a true
around.
story that happened before Colleen.
Okay, wow.
Yes. So then Janice said she tried to calm Marie down. They went to their house where Cameron took Marie down to the basement and hung her from the hooks of the rafters. Later, Cameron called Janice to the bathroom because he needed her to hold a towel to Marie's neck because he tried to cut out her vocal cords. remember when he threatened to cut out Colleen's vocal cords? He had done that before and it didn't go well. So I don't think he would have actually tried to do
That was
it
like an empty threat
because he
learned-
failed. But
yeah.
it was a threat of like, oh well, I've done it before, so maybe I'll try again. So
learn from my mistakes.
yes.
You know, gotta move on.
So
Oh Lord.
he says he messed up and he's like, I tried to cut out our vocal cords and it didn't work. So he's upset. So then he takes her down to the basement, still naked, hangs her back up. He came upstairs and he needed a paper and a pencil because apparently he said the girl wants to tell me something but she can't speak.
I wonder why.
Yeah, maybe because you tried to cut her vocal cords, you psychopath. So then he goes back down there with the pencil and the paper, how kind, and the girl writes, I'll give you anything if you let me go.
Oh, that's what's Colleen?
No. This is the girl.
No, but Colleen said that kind of later. Like,
Oh, yes,
yeah.
kind of the same thing when she was in the box, yes.
Like, that's the first thing that happened. Like, he was hanging up, like, I'll give you anything.
And he
Let me
immediately
go.
shut her up, yeah.
Yeah, so he's learned from experience.
So he went back down, and he was a little bit later, and he was very distraught. And he comes back up, and distraught again, and he's like, what did I do? And his wife's like, what? And then turns out he shot Marie twice in the stomach with a pellet gun and killed her.
Okay, interesting.
And strangled her, because apparently that wasn't good enough.
Owie.
So then he tells Janice, go get a blanket. And they wrap her body up, and they drive her towards Latson Park and buried her body. They only kept a watch, which was later accidentally destroyed at Cameron's work. I'm sure it was not an accident. They never found her body, and they had no proof or evidence, so they couldn't do anything about this. But Marie was reported missing
Okay.
when this happened.
Okay.
And so this is an open case that is believed that Cameron did kill her because of this confession, but they have no proof. They have no body. Janice tried to take them to the body multiple times, allegedly, and they could not find it. So part of me thinks that part of this isn't true.
That's kind of what I was wondering. Yeah.
Because you're telling me, I'm sorry, but if I see somebody kill someone and then I drive with them to bury the body, I think I'm going to remember where it is.
Yeah. And
It was also winter time, so it could have been, I don't know. I want to give the benefit of the doubt that like things could have looked different and maybe this really was the story, but part of me thinks that Janice played a bigger role in it, and because she wanted her suffering to end so badly. But then she got Colleen a little bit later. So now we're to the trial.
Okay.
So during the trial, Cameron's defense tried to argue that Colleen was a willing slave, and that Cameron had originally kidnapped her, but when he tried to let her go, she didn't want to leave.
Yeah, that sounds.
Yeah, that sounds likely.
Yeah, totally feasible for that to happen.
And he wasn't afraid of, you're thinking like, oh, why would he admit to kidnapping her? He wasn't afraid of the kidnapping charge because he was like, in his head, he was like, statute of limitation. I am not going to get charged for that. It's been so long. It had been 7 years. Actually, it had been more than that by this time.
Yeah, because time has gone on.
Yes, exactly. So he was like, he thought he was good. They also had letters that Colleen had written to them that I told you about. And after she had already returned to her family, they were very casual and very friendly, sort of lovey. They also talked on the phone a lot, and they brought that up. And they talked about her missing them, and they even expressed a sort of love for him and Janice. So that was a little convincing. They also referred to the multiple phone calls that Colleen had made to the hookers after returning home. They used the fact that Colleen went jogging often, was able to talk to her family, supervised of course, was able to visit her family unsupervised and was left there for 24 hours. And on many occasions, she was left alone at the hooker's home babysitting the kids. She went out to bars with Janice. Basically, they were like, she had ample opportunity to escape. Why didn't she? Because she was a willing slave.
They're also like upplaying it. Like she went to the bar once. She saw her family.
No, they did that multiple times.
Oh, they did go to the bar.
They did go to the bar multiple times. The family thing was once, though.
Yeah, the family thing in the phone call was, like, I think, once.
Yeah.
With the bars. Okay.
So it's not like they had, like, it's not like she had time to be like, oh, you know, maybe I could tell my family because I'm feeling more comfortable. No, it was a one-time thing. And then when she got back, she got put in the box for 3 years.
Yes, who would?
So what in your head convinces you that you could go to someone?
Yeah.
So Colleen's defense obviously presented the jury with evidence of a long-term confinement and torture. And of course, the threat of the company was very apparent. They specifically avoided the term brainwashing because her attorney was terrified that if they tried to use that term, they would fail. Because back then, people didn't know anything about brainwashing and all that. So they didn't want to try and present something new and people be like, no, we don't know enough about that.
And make her seem like she's crazy or something.
Exactly.
Like an aluminum hat.
Yeah. So she avoided that because there was a higher chance of losing. There wasn't a lot of evidence or research of brainwashing at the time, so they didn't really think they had a good chance of proving it.
Yeah.
So, sure, to an outside perspective, it probably does seem like Colleen had ample opportunity to escape or tell somebody what's going on. But she was convinced that the hookers had paid a lot of money, $30,000, even more than that other times, to guarantee that if something went wrong, they would be okay. And her family and she would not be. So, yes, maybe in your head you think that she could have escaped and she had all these opportunities, but she was terrified.
And you're also on the outside looking in.
Exactly.
Like, you know, like you don't know what was going through her brain because you've never been in a box for 3 years with a bedpan smelling your own fluids and stuff coming
Yes.
out of you. Like, because you said she didn't get to clean it every day.
Yep.
So like, I don't want to talk about it, but just imagine like smelling your own fecal matter.
I don't want to.
Yeah. Just, but like, how crazy would that drive you?
Yeah, insane. So Janice, even though she was very conflicted about all of this, did testify against Cameron.
Okay.
Not out of the kindness of her heart. She was granted immunity.
There was a bargain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when she walked into the courtroom, she didn't even glance at Cameron.
Ooh.
And Janice described Cameron as a sadomasochist, which is when you feel gratification for the pleasure and pain that you're inflicting on other people, especially sexual gratification.
Right.
So they displayed many of the items involved in Colleen's confinement, and Janice pointed them all out. Many of them were drawings or pictures because they didn't have the actual stuff. The nightgown that she was rarely able to wear, the bedpan that she was forced to use, the box that she was forced into time and time again was there, the leather restraints forced around her wrist, even the head box that was forced onto her head. And she was initially kidnapped. They had pictures of that.
The actual pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
So, the box they had there, though, and they actually brought in someone who looked like Colleen and had her get inside the box. Not Colleen, someone who looked like her. Because that would be traumatic as F.
Good job.
Thank you.
So proud.
Thank you. I worked so hard.
I messed up once, but yeah,
It's okay. So, yeah, so that would be very traumatic. So they did that, but they wanted the jury to see because people were having such a hard time believing how did a human live in this box. So they wanted to show people that. They also blew up 2 photos of Colleen nude hanging by the wrists with her slave collar around her neck.
Real photos.
Real photos.
I'm glad that we kept those.
Yeah.
Sentimental purposes.
This is really disturbing, but the news people were ecstatic when these got put up, and they were so excited, and they got really close and tried to take pictures, and then they got close, and they immediately were like, oh.
Yeah.
That's, wow. They looked at her and they looked how malnourished and abused she was. And in their head, they were like, there's no way. If this was willing, she would have been fed, right? They would have fed her, they would have taken care of her because she would have been this willing slave. No.
Yeah.
So that was eye-opening for them, and nobody published those. None of the news outlets. So that's nice. Janice went on to testify that Cameron used the Bible to try and justify what he was doing. He referred to different parts of the Bible and twisted them to what he wanted. He convinced her that certain passages were talking about how slaves and wives should be completely submissive to their husbands. Yeah, I know a lot of churches, never heard that one.
He also wasn't very good at reading, as you mentioned at the beginning of.
Correct.
What?
So he just took things that he wanted and twisted them.
Maybe this was his understanding.
I do not believe. I'm sorry, I screamed at that. I do not believe that he misread the Bible. You could not convince me of that. The slave and wife shall obey me.
Yeah, that's what those letters make words to me.
Words, yes.
Wow.
He also told her that if she didn't do everything that he told her to do, she would go to hell. And everyone was really thrown off by how Cameron could be who he is and somehow try to use the Bible as justification. Are you dying? Oh my God, do you need a drink?
Yeah.
Oh my God, don't die on my podcast! Next, on The Dark and Decrepit, we will dissect the death of TJ, and I'll cry a lot.
And we have charcuterie. I was trying so hard because you were on a roll, and I was like,
Don't kill yourself so I can finish talking about Cameron frickin' Hooker.
and I was like, I really want her juice, but I don't
Drink, DJ! God.
I sniffled a little bit and I inhaled my spit.
This is a great opportunity for me to eat nuts, so it's okay.
I'm sorry, I'm still in your drink.
It's okay.
Okay.
Look at this adorable cup. We have these adorable glasses. Do they have spiders on them? Chink!
Ting!
Ting!
I had my pinky out because his finger got broken when
Cause
I was
fancy.
little. Well, now it's hard to close.
I was like, no, it's not
Cause
fancy, it's deformed.
fancy. No, it's actually a defect in me now. Some girl kicked me trying to get on the swing. I love her. She was great. We were like in 5th grade.
Okay, cool. So,
I had juice.
yeah, you got juice.
Bye. Sorry, I stole your juice. It's okay. Anyway, please, I want to
So
know.
everyone was really thrown off by how Cameron could be who he is and somehow try to use the Bible as justification. Like, you're seeing all of these crazy things, these straps, these restraints, all these things in front of these people, these torture pictures, and then the Bible is in the midst of all this. And that, like, really threw people for a loop.
Yeah.
Janice testified for 2.5 days about everything that had been done to Colleen.
Oh my god.
And everything Cameron had done to keep Colleen under his thumb. When she was cross-examined, Cameron's attorney tried to present everything as if it was consensual. It didn't help. Now I'm dying.
Sorry, it's not funny. It's just ironic.
It's okay. So it didn't help Colleen's case that rumors had been started that Colleen and Janice were lesbians and that this was all a plot to get rid of Cameron so that they could be together.
What a twist.
Yeah. Luckily, this was not taken into consideration.
Okay, that's good.
And after a long back and forth from the prosecution and the defense, it was time for the jury to decide.
Okay.
The jury gave their verdict on none other than your girl's favorite holiday, Halloween! Yes, October 31st!
What a coinky ding.
I know, pretty cool.
Yeah.
Oh, Cameron, I hope you burn in hell. And bless this beautiful outcome for Colleen, Cameron Hooker was charged with rape on multiple accounts, kidnap, and use of a knife. That doesn't seem like a lot, but you have to understand that there were a lot of statute of limitations because of how long ago this happened. They had to fight for the kidnapping charge and present it as she was kidnapped, yes, 10 years ago, 7 to 10 years ago, or however long it was, but she was continuously kept captive.
Yeah.
So that was a weird case to try and argue. It was a hard one. I looked everywhere for Colleen's victim impact statement and could not find it. But the book does very, very briefly say that her attorney read it for her. And the book says it was very long, but they sum it up in one sentence.
Okay.
Really? You couldn't give me the deets? And this was like partially written, or at least like collaborated with her attorney. So like you couldn't have put some of that in there, girl?
Some flavor words in there?
You put the whole contract in there, but I can't see the victim impact statement.
Rude.
So, to sum it up very quickly, she just stated that she asked Hooker be locked away for as long as possible so that what happened to her could never happen to someone else. That's very fair. But I would love to know what other things she said, because that can't possibly be all the feelings she had, you know?
No, I'm sure you would have a lot of feelings.
So Judge Knight sentenced Cameron with the maximum sentence for every crime he was convicted for. Hooker was sentenced to serve 104 years in prison. Hooker didn't show any emotion, but he did ask his attorney for one thing.
McDonald's.
That would be very on point for this man. No, he asked him to thank the judge for him. You want to know what he was thankful for?
Yeah.
He said, I have a library, a gym, and all the time to enjoy them. It's a lot better than living with those two women.
The nerve!
I know, I would have punched him in his dumb, ugly face. I don't even know what he looks like, but I'm sure he's ugly. Yeah. 3 days after his conviction, he somehow is allowed to call Colleen. Yeah, and he just says, I just called so you could chew my butt out or say whatever you want. Like, exactly that. And Colleen just said, I have nothing to say to you, and hangs up. And then immediately calls her lawyer, and her lawyer contacts the prison and he's like, you have to make sure he can't call her.
Do your job.
Yeah, do
You
your
have, like,
job.
a few jobs, but that's a pretty big one.
Yes.
Don't let them contact the victim.
Yes. And there are a lot of laws in place now to prevent stuff like that from happening, and there weren't then.
Yeah.
But she still got it all taken care of, so good on her.
Oh, good.
At the end of the book, they talked about Cameron and how it would be easy to blame previous abuse for his actions because it is, quote, often the case the victims of abuse become abusers themselves.
What?
Did you know that that's not actually true?
I didn't know that.
Yes. So I went to school for social work.
Right.
And I had a concentration in mental health and trauma.
Okay.
Wasted a lot of money trying to learn stuff about myself.
It was the journey.
It was the journey. I paid for it. Still paying for it.
But
Cries
priceless.
internally. But there are a lot of studies dating back as far as 1989 that reflect that only a third of abuse victims become abusers themselves.
And that could just be like coinky dink.
Yes, it's very rare. It's actually far more likely for victims of abuse to allow that to continue into their adult lives to themselves. They won't abuse other people, but they'll
Be like doormats.
they'll get into bad relationships and stay in them longer because that's what they know, that's what they're used to.
Yeah, they don't know what love looks like, so how do they
Exactly.
know when it's true or not?
Yes, exactly. I don't. I know. I don't want to say they allow themselves because obviously it's not intentional, but it's hard to break that cycle. So they do allow themselves unintentionally to stay in those bad cycles.
No, and I can relate a little bit. I think
Yeah.
we can all kind of relate to that. We're all emo kids these days, so like, yeah, I feel like we can all kind of look back on the time of like, I didn't really want this to happen to me, but I didn't really know better.
Yeah.
So I allowed it, So.
And you have to work on those things to make sure that they don't keep happening.
Self-love, guys. It's just
So
not getting
important.
your nails done. It's really
You
important.
know who shouldn't have self-love?
Cameron.
freaking Hooker. Cameron also wasn't abused.
Yeah, he had a nice, happy family.
Yes, he was just psychotic. He created these fantasies in his head. He found a timid, submissive young woman. He made her feel love for the first time in her life and convinced her that if she allowed him to commit these evil acts on another human, that she could evade them.
If you love me, you'll let me do this.
Yeah.
Ugh. Gross. Sorry.
I'm sure you're thinking, how did he come up with all of these methods he used on Colleen?
I mean, he did read some dirty magazines, but I don't know.
He did. But I can confidently say
Mhm.
that he got all of his inspiration from a film that him and Janice saw in 1976.
Oh.
You wait. This is crazy. It is called The Story of O. It's about a young girl being educated to adopt sadomasochistic lifestyle. In the film, the slave was renamed an initial rather than a full name.
Okay.
So O is completely submissive and does exactly what she's told. She's blindfolded, tied up, all similar to what Colleen went through. O is referred to as obeying her lover when she's being told to do things. Do you remember when Cameron talked about wanting many slave wives?
Mm-hmm.
So in the movie, there are multiple women getting O ready, and they're wearing collars, their breasts are exposed, and they keep telling O that she can't cross her legs, and she can't keep them closed because it's forbidden.
That was in the contract.
In the contract. This really puts into perspective why Cameron was so frustrated that Janice and Colleen were not getting along. Remember? Because in the movie, he sees all these women who are wearing what they're told to wear. Their breasts are exposed. They're wearing this dress where they can't wear panties. So they're wearing a dress where there's easy access to everything going on their body. So he was frustrated that Colleen and her weren't getting along because of that. The movie shows the slave women all getting along with each other and just obeying their masters like they're supposed to. At one point, one of the women tries to talk to, the new woman, and the other woman's like, we're not supposed to speak. And they both get up and they leave. The other one's, reminding that one, you can't talk. She's like, okay, and they leave because they're conditioned. I think Cameron was dying to live this fantasy. I watched the movie, and I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, and I mean that. And I'm not, squeamish with movies, and it's not even that it's squeamish. It was honestly just gross. It was very sexual. They showed the women being raped, forcing them to perform oral sex, and being sodomized. Showed it, all of it.
Oh no.
Yes.
That's traumatizing.
Yeah, don't watch this movie. But if you want to watch this movie, it's free on Pluto TV. But don't watch it.
Like, really don't.
No, seriously, it's terrible. They show her being strung up with leather straps and being whipped. They talk about ways to make the pain last longer. At one point, they put her in a comfy bed. They let her sleep in the bed. And then randomly in the night, a man comes in the room, pulls her out of the bed, waking her from a dead sleep, hangs her from her leather straps, and whips her. And in the movie, he twists her a little bit so that it hits her back and wraps around to her stomach,
Which is
just like Colleen described. It's exactly what Cameron did to Colleen.
y'all. Okay, so this is unrelated but related. In Shrek, Forever After, Rumpelstiltskin deletes one day out of Shrek's life, and like just to think about if that was possible, the day this guy saw this movie,
If we would have just deleted
if
it.
we could just delete this one day out of this guy's life, like they did in Shrek.
Yes.
Maybe this would happen.
Take a footnote from Shrek.
Just,
So, watching the movie, you would think that this was the story of what Colleen went through. Because, like, this is, like,
that's
so
kind of like what
similar.
happened.
it was very sexual. Uncomfortably sexual. Like, I felt like I was watching porn out here.
Yeah.
It was terrible. I was like, oh my goodness, what is this? But, like, I had to get the information so that you guys didn't have to. And it really didn't, like, you know what I mean? Like, I wasn't watching it, I wasn't like, oh, I'm so disturbed. I was just like, who made this movie? Like, no one should watch this.
No, there was okay. So one time I was like scrolling through TV trying to find something to watch while I fold clothes, and it was like some movie. I was like, oh, cool movie, whatever. And it depicted like a guy in jail, and one of the jailers came in and was like, "You're pretty," and like depicted basically him being bent over and crying, and the guy spit on his hand, wiped it on the guy's butt, and like raped him. And it didn't show the act. It just showed the, like, precursors.
Yeah, and then the aftermath.
And then, like, him being, like, crying and going home to his wife. And then, like, his relationship with his wife was strained because he was raped. And that made me sick.
Yeah.
Like, I almost threw up.
Have you seen The Last House on the Left?
No.
You shouldn't.
Okay.
It's a really good movie, I will say that, but it has the most realistic rape scene I've ever seen in my life.
I'm good.
I cried. It made me so sad. It was so hard to watch. Like, ended up having to skip through part of that movie because I could not watch it.
No, and people, like, rape is such, like, a really common word these days. Like,
Yeah.
we all know people who have been raped. You know, like, everyone knows somebody who knows somebody at least. And we talk about it like it's...
That's so sad.
Yeah, we talk about it, like, right now, like, it's so normal, but when...
But, like, it shouldn't be.
Yeah, but, like, for you to be like, I couldn't even watch it.
Yeah.
And we talk about it so liberally, I guess, like, out of the open. It's awful. So, yeah, this is, like, unfathomable to me how awful.
Yeah. Terrible. So, where are they now? Cameron Hooker, in February of 2021, despite his original sentence, Cameron was deemed to be up for parole
Ew.
due to a new California parole law that applied to prisoners over 50 who had served at least 20 years of their sentence. His next parole hearing was pushed to April of this year, but I'm assuming it was pushed again because I searched the internet, I scoured the internet, and I couldn't find anything more recent than that. And that was written in March of this year. So I can only assume that it got pushed again and there was no news on it. Because if he got out, there would be news.
Yeah, well, and also, like, I guess this is, like, the one time I can say, like, thank you, COVID, for pushing,
Yes, thank you.
like, keeping him a little bit
There
longer.
are plenty of DAs fighting to not let this happen.
Good.
Yes.
I
So,
wonder who is fighting for it to happen.
hopefully no one. It's just the new law that
Oh,
they
it's just
put
the
in place.
law. So
Yeah.
maybe, okay.
So nobody's like, let him out! They're just like, there's this law, we have to do it. And they're like, no, you don't. So, I don't care. So, I wouldn't care how much this man changed, but from everything I've read, he hasn't changed one bit. He's done nothing the entire time he's been in prison to change his life. He's the same exact person.
Just reading books, hanging out.
Yes. And he stole 7 years of this woman's life, and more than that.
And more than that, because you have to heal from the trauma.
And she never will fully, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, he does not deserve to ever be out. if you know what, it would be really fitting if they would have put him in a box for 7 years, an actual coffin-sized box, and only let him out to clean his own bedpan and eat, because that's what this man deserves.
Yeah, that would be a really good karma thing to have happen.
Janice Hooker, now known as Janice Lashley, was granted immunity for testifying against Cameron. She went on to raise her 2 daughters and has been working in Butte County as a mental health professional since 1998. And she hasn't stayed in contact with Colleen or Cameron.
Interesting, considering that she was a very shallow person who was like, well, I didn't get hung from a tree or from a pipe, so,
Yeah.
you know, that's fine.
See,
Let's
that's
help
why
people mentally.
it's hard to like feel bad for her, because I'm like, I don't know. There's just it's confliction for me.
I just don't know, like, who would go to her.
On these spooky arms. It's spooky. Yeah, no, I'm definitely not going to friggin' Janice Hooker, now Janice Lashley, whatever your dumb name
I'm just
is.
wondering, like, how when you're a photographer, you have a portfolio. Like, these are the pictures I take in, these are the styles I can do. And then for her little portfolio, like, well, I did traumatize one kid, so now I guess I know how to help you.
Yeah, I traumatized a woman for the rest of her life.
So now I'm a professional. That's just such a weird
Yeah.
concept to think about. Like, if she went to like rescuing dogs, or she worked at the pretzel place, or like
Pretzel place.
like,
I
literally
love pretzels.
Burger-
I don't want her touching my pretzels.
I'm just saying, like, like I don't want her to do anything, but I mean, if she's got to work to provide for her family,
Yeah.
like literally anything but mental health would be appropriate.
Agreed. So Colleen Stan, there's not a lot on her. She hasn't really done any interviews, which I don't blame her. She really she wanted to move on with her life.
Yeah,
So
she didn't want to go to the police.
yeah, she got married. She had a daughter. It was a very complicated pregnancy, but she had a daughter.
I'm sure from all the
Yeah,
trauma, scar
Exactly.
tissue from.
I'm thankful. So yeah, I'm glad that she got to experience having a child in her life.
Yeah, that's what a normal thing to have. Like I assume a husband and
Yeah, who's
child.
like caring. Hopefully.
Yeah,
everything I
it has
read.
to be. Yeah.
Yeah.
Man,
But again, it's like you have to think about the fact that people who go through trauma usually, bring that onto themselves for, into their adult life. So, but all good things now. I mean, that was a rough one.
that's pretty
Heavy.
heavy.
Dark and decrepit. Well, thank you for tuning in, and I hope that you watch next week and have just as much fun with us, because we have the best time doing these, drinking sparkling cider and eating our charcuterie boards.
Always.
And yeah, that's all I got. So thanks for tuning into the Dark and Decrepit. Woo! We do our thing.
The thing.
We have a thing. Oh, I just
Punch.
punched it. Boom.
We have a
We have a
thing
thing now. Well, it's pretty cute.
It's very
Thank you.
original.